Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Johnson. I was just thinking the other day, and I guess a little bit today, of course, how interesting it is that when you go to do a certain topic or a certain project or a certain program of some type, and then you interact with it, sometimes the things that you learn don't have a lot to do with the topic or the program as much as the experience. Sometimes it's the experience that teaches you what you need to learn. The reason I say that is because I've been teaching some Bible studies. I say teaching, actually they're discussions where people bring questions and we work on studying the scripture to figure out some of the theological answers. And I've noticed in the teaching of the Bible study that a lot of questions that I have, questions that I haven't really thought about or said on top of or worried because they sit in the back of my mind, suddenly I get those questions answered as I'm interacting with other people or even interacting with the scriptures and reading them, trying to study them. So my point is, and I don't want to divert from it, my point is that there's a lot of things to learn from the experience. When you go to school, it's important and you expect to learn the basics of whatever subject you happen to be learning and studying, and that's very important. But the greater experience is the interacting with other people, interacting with a teacher and learning how to deal with it. Learning to interact and learning to experience is what changes your life and makes its impression. And sometimes you just have to be open to looking at the experiences that are happening in your life. I say that to reflect on when I was a missionary in Dominican Republic, and I was traveling around the world on troubleshooting problems. I owned 2 horses. I had bought them both in the Dominican Republic, and the horses there are a little smaller than they are here in America. So I have to buy what is a bigger horse because I'm a big man. And the poor horse has to put on a lot of weight, has to hold a lot of weight on his back when he carries me. I say all this to talk about an experience that I had. I had 2 horses. One was a big brown one, real lovable horse, and because he looked a lot like the murky rivers of the Dominican Republic, I called him Rio, which is Spanish for river. And he was a lovable horse, had a great personality. Boy, did he have big teeth. Speaking of teeth, you know, they almost never ate vegetables. At least the 2 horses that I bought never had vegetables. They ate grass and they drink the river water. And that's pretty well how they survived, which made it easy to take care of them. But I had to teach them about the apple, about the carrot. I had to hold it to their mouth and wait until they would bite it and taste it a little bit and then eventually decide that they liked it. Now, interestingly enough, Smokey didn't like carrots too much. So he wouldn't come around when I was feeding Rio carrots. Rio took to him. He seemed to like them. I'm not sure that they liked him. They sometimes seemed to tolerate him. Anyway, I learned one thing in owning 2 horses. And any kid that wants to be a cowboy in his life should own a horse for at least a little time. Horses are like big dogs. They think like dogs. They're anxious for your approval. And both of the horses that I had were just real anxious to do whatever I want them to do. And I guess that's probably how you train them. They get to understand what you want, and if you can communicate to them what you're trying to get them to do, they'll do it. Of course, when you jump on their back, put a saddle on their back, or ride them around, they get to understand that part of it. And then who knows what else. But Smokey was a wonderful white, dark kind of horse. He was white grayish, so I called him Smokey. He looked like smoke. He was white, but he was very grayish at the time. And boy, could he run! He ran fast. He was a quick rider, and fun to jump on. And he enjoyed running. So, needless to say, taking him around was a joy. I had to go travel about 10 miles out of town, Arbacoa, to speak to a youth group. And I was staying there with them overnight. They were camping out. So after we had our little meeting, and I spoke to them and interacted with the kids, we all slept under the stars. And it was a very nice, warm night, what have you. And of course I had secured Smokey. I had ridden him to the spot 10 miles out of town. And I had secured his harness to a fence so that hopefully he wouldn't wander off. And then, kind of a restless night, we slept on the grass, but it was fun. It was a good night, good to experience. But I had to get up early in the morning in order to get back to town because I had a staff meeting in town about 8:30, scheduled for 8:30 in the morning. And since it would take about who knows how long to get dressed and then of course to get Smokey into town, and I'd have to decide, did I need to go home and pick up any materials, or did I just go to the office where the meeting was? I decided I'd just go to the office, save time and what have you. So I pulled myself together and started walking over to where Smokey had been secured to the fence. Now it was a slopey hill that we had all slept on, and went up towards the fence. So I went over to where I had secured Smokey the day before, and there was no Smokey. And some of the harness was still hanging on the fence. Didn't look like he pulled away hard. It just looked like I hadn't secured it properly. So I took the harness that was off the fence, and then I had to look around for Smokey. Well, the interesting thing to me was I didn't have to look hard. There was Smokey under the nearest tree, just standing there, as if he was waiting for me to come get him. And I believe, now that I think it over, he was waiting for me. In fact, later on, just to test him, I would ride to certain houses to visit during my missionary visits of people. And instead of securing him to the tree or the fence like I was used to, I let him kind of roam around freely. I talked to him and I said, now listen, I've got to go visit these people, and I'll be over here a little while. Now you may laugh because I'm talking on the horse, but let me tell you, both those horses certainly seemed to understand exactly what I was saying. Their ears would go up, they would listen to me, and very often they would do things that I'd ask them to do. Once you own a horse, you'll experience that same thing. So don't laugh at me until you try it. Anyway, I told Smokey we'd go into town. I'd have to think about what I needed, if I needed any materials or not. And then we'd have to go to my house, pick up the materials, and then go to the place where we were having the staff meeting. Well, I put my nice saddle on Smokey and said goodbye to the kids who were just waking up, and goodbye to the staff. And then we headed back towards town. Now, it's still very dark. Beautiful country. You have to picture that if you haven't been there yet or seen anything, that every time you go around a hill or a curve, you're liable to see a beautiful waterfall, gorgeous river, mountains all over the place, and also the mountains are interseeded with roads, and of course these roads are for people that are driving cars, which was a little bit unusual. And there were no cars in the middle of the night. And early in the morning, it was totally empty. So Smokey and I take off on these no-car roads, which are full of stones, very gravelly. Many stones have fallen off the mountains, but they've been paved in, and somebody has made some of these roads so that the cars can go by. And Smokey and I are traveling on this road. I decided while I was going that I didn't need to go to the house. I didn't really need any supplies. I'd take a pen and paper just in case I needed to make some notes or something. And we started galloping towards the city. Now I want you to picture, these are very winding roads. In other words, you look over the road and you look down at a cliff in a valley, and a very deep cliff and valley with lots of vegetation. Well, literally a jungle. Now you can look to the side, you can see a beautiful waterfall and mountain that goes up who knows how high, and then you travel around and it's gorgeous, but right now it's very, very dark. So we're walking along. I take a look at my watch and think, we're not making good time here. I might be a little bit late. I better pick up the speed. So by picking up the speed, I tapped Smokey on the back and, you know, pushed him a little bit and said, "Let's go, buddy." He didn't change pace. Still going very, very slow. Now, that wasn't like Smokey. Smokey was always both reflective and responsive. He loved rides. He loved having somebody on him. He loved knowing the interaction that he would have. And he loved travel. He was as much a tourist as I was. But this time, he's taking his time. I said to him, "Smokey, we got to pick up the pace a little bit. We're going to be late if we don't get going faster." So I tap him a little bit in the back. I push in a little bit to make him go, and come on, let's go. Still doesn't go much faster. In fact, we're taking our time. We are really slow. Slower we are, the later we're getting. Now I'm getting a little bit worried. Smokey, come on, we got to get going. He would not move. It wasn't like him to be non-responsive. But here we've been already on the road about an hour. I only had I had maybe half an hour before I was going to be late. So we needed to pick up the pace and get going. But every time I tried to make him move, and again I say this was not like him because I already knew him. I'd ridden him all over the place. He just wouldn't go. I didn't fight it. I just rode. He kept walking slowly, and I just went along with him as whatever his pace was, and I talked to him like I did all the time. We just talked and just had a good conversation. But as I was watching carefully, as I'm riding him and trying to understand him, I noticed that he slows down when we come to a curve. And these curves were not just little curves. These are strong curves that come around quickly. And then they go right into the mountain, and then you go around another curve, and the cliff is all the way down the roads. In other words, the road is here and the road ends, and then down that road is a far cliff, a dangerous cliff if you're not careful. And I noticed that as we were going around many of these turns, being careful, and I was amazed at the beauty of the scenery, Smokey was just slowing down. And then I watched him as he carefully seemed to go around the corners and what have you. It wasn't like Smokey. I couldn't figure out why we weren't making any progress. And then the sun starts to come out. You see the beautiful sun over the mountains. all of a sudden everything is brighter, everything you can see a little bit, and the better you can see, the more Smokey picked up the pace. He took off and started moving. In fact, when the sun became the brightest, we were moving very fast. And then Smokey was back to his normal pace. Smokey was a fast horse and loved to run. And I suddenly got to understand Smokey couldn't see in the dark. There was something about Smokey's eyes that meant that he could not see where the cliff was or how to move around quickly, and if he moved too fast, he knew not only he but I would fall over the cliff. He was worried about me as much as he was himself. And he would not pick up the pace because he did not trust his own steading. And so we went a certain pace carefully until it was very bright, and then Smokey picked up and zoomed to the office where we had the meeting. It was just something I learned about Smokey that I didn't know. I learned that in daylight, Smokey could see fine, but there was something wrong with Smokey's eyes in the dark. It's one thing for us to be able to see some in the dark. Smokey couldn't see at all. He didn't have that vision that I had. He couldn't see the cliffs. He couldn't be careful about, and he was responsible for making sure that we made it safe. He cared about me. He took it easy and made sure that we were safely there. Just something you learn about horses after a while. Smokey knew more about the trip than I did, and Smokey took care of both of us. It was just fun to have a horse, and it was fun to learn things like that, things that Smokey knew what he was doing, took good care of me. I'll never forget. Thanks for listening.